beautiful car is named after the city of its birth. Built in 1946, this is the Bristol 400. The know-how that built Bristol's luxury cars is due to the city's long experience building aircraft. All these aeroplanes were built in Bristol, and this fantastic collection belongs to the new Aerospace Bristol Museum. Today they're opening the doors to our guests, and we're hoping for some supersonic discoveries.
Never.
And something doesn't quite look right.
No.
It's utterly bonkers. Yeah. I love it.
The city's proud history is celebrated by this brand new museum, Aerospace Bristol, and they are the hosts for today's Antiques Roadshow.
So you brought me the most delightful little bar brooch. It's in the form of a four-leaf clover, decorated with green enamel, central diamond, and a little ladybird. What do you know about it?
Not a lot. It was a birthday present from my husband, daughter and son-in-law 3 years ago.
Oh, how marvellous.
There's an inscription, actually, either side of the brooch. It's from the Queen, Balmoral, 1900 to GML.
This was Queen of the United Kingdom and Empress of India, but ironically this was at the extreme winter of her life. She only had one more year to live at most, and this is something clearly from her heart that she wanted to give to a close associate. In a strange way, it's less Victorian than it is Edwardian. It's almost a transitional piece in its style. Yeah. And jewellery is always loaded with emotional content, but the emotional content's really quite high in this instance, isn't it, from a very important lady. And so how to measure that magic financially? So I'm thinking somewhere in the region of £4,000 to £5,000 would be good.
That's incredible.
This immediately jumped out at me because it's so bright. The image is really bold in its technique, and the paint has been layered up so much it almost feels like a sculpture. How long have you had it for?
In the mid-90s, and I really liked 20th century art. And similarly, you know, it was quite a happy subject, and I was quite attracted by it because of that.
It can only be 20th century because it is almost abstract, and we can see that helpfully the artist has signed it. So at the bottom we've got Lewis James, and also he's dated it 61, so 1961. And post the Second World War, this really marks a real break from what went before. He's also given us the title, we can see at the top. It's called The Little Kingdom. And I think that is really helpful because when you first look at it, it does look entirely abstract. You can't quite work out what it is. But when we know it's the kingdom, slowly what I love about it is emerging from all of this colour and paint, you start seeing what I read as perhaps towers. It feels like maybe a hilltop town, lots of houses close together.
Yeah, definitely. And perhaps windows as well, you know, tells lots of little stories.
So Lewis James is a really well-known Australian artist, and interestingly, he was entirely self-taught as a painter. He started out his life in the Land Survey Department in Adelaide, but then after the Second World War, in which he served, he ended up living and working in London, and he must have been inspired by Freud and then some of the abstract artists who were really breaking with tradition, Patrick Heron, Roger Hilton, all of these great colourists. And I think all of that energy is absorbed into something like this. For a self-taught artist to paint with such energy, it shows he clearly had a really great talent. And he exhibited at one of the most avant-garde art galleries in London at the time, the Redfern Gallery, and he showed there in the 50s and 60s, so it's highly likely this was probably painted when he was living in London. Where do you have it hanging at home?
Well, I have it in my main room, yeah. I do like it. It's interesting, just looking at it now, I can see how that paint is superimposed the green on top of the red, which is quite unusual. I hadn't noticed that before myself, you know. It's the way it's lit.
What did you pay back in the 90s?
I know it was between £100 and £200.
So £100 to £200 for an Australian artist who's actually quite well represented in Australia. He's in all the major Australian art galleries.
Really? I didn't realise.
I think your investment of whatever it was, £100 to £200, sometimes fares well, sometimes doesn't. But in this case, if this was coming to the market today, I would put an estimate of £1,000 to £1,500.
Okay, thank you. That's nice to know. Thank you.
Impractical spoon that's ever been.
Me too.
Has it ever been used? That's what I want to know.
No, it did go missing for a few months, and my father was quite concerned where it was, and it ended up in the sandpit. And my brother had been using it as a tool in the sandpit. No, that's true.
What age was your brother?
Probably 2, 3, in the 60s.
Of all the choices of things to dig the sandpit, he dug the sandpit with that.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did this sandpit digger come into your possession?
Well, it was given to my father in 1930 as a christening present, and he'd really like to know the maker and origin, and so would I. I'd like to know what it's made of and a bit about it, please.
Those I can tell you. It's actually made of glass. The silver element of it is put together with a construction called filigree, which is made by wire and very carefully soldering together with grains of solder, hence filigree. It's been put together as a skeleton. And then in all of the reserves, the empty parts, in other words, the parts where the wire isn't, they fill it with glass enamel, which is an incredibly difficult job to do. You have to use the surface tension of the liquid glass, the melted glass, and you pêcheur, which comes from the French meaning a glimpse of the day or a glimpse of light. Because if you hold it up to the light, you can see straight through it. It's like a stained glass window.
Stained glass, yes. Yeah, we've always called it the stained glass spoon.
Right. On the end here, we've got a dragon's head, which actually is a clue to where it comes from. It's made in Norway. There is no maker's mark on it. There are no silver marks on it, and that's a very good reason for that, is because there's nowhere on it you could conceivably put a silver mark. It was probably made by a man called Marius Hammer, who is a Norwegian silversmith who specialised in exactly this sort of thing, but without a mark, we can't say that for certain. Well, not only is it a very fragile, I think incredibly pretty and delicate little spoon, and completely useless, but because it's in immaculate condition, there's a huge collector's market out there for it. If you wanted to buy that, it would cost you a minimum of about £600.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. My father will be absolutely thrilled to bits.
I have to say, in the days of emails and texts, it's a delight to see a little object like this. This dates from about as a country house letterbox, and it would have been for posting little thank you letters and notes through the postal system. My feeling is that if it came up for sale, we would make £1,500, £1,800 of it. Would it make 2,000? It's pretty sad. I think it really could.
Well, it's for sale.
You saw me driving in this gorgeous Bristol 400 earlier. Well, George was actually behind the wheel. And George, this car is virtually in the DNA of your family, because your great-grandfather started the aircraft production company here at Bristol Filter.
He did.
Then your grandfather and father carried that on but diversified into car production.
They did, after
And
the
here
Second
you
World War.
are driving one of your father's cars. And it's a particularly significant car to you, isn't it?
It is, because it turns out to be the first car that was ever sold. There were 2 or 3 prototypes made, and then this was the first semi-production car sold.
I must say, the design of it is gorgeous. It's just such a beautiful thing.
The design of the airplane company, there was some suggestion that it might be a little out of date. It was derived from the pre-war BMW, and therefore was not the latest design. And my father replied to the criticisms with quite a sharp note, saying that if anybody was responsible for the shape of the car, it was him. And it really is an extraordinary thing now to be driving around in a car which you know that your father had designed.
I love the colour, though it's not the original colour, is it?
Well, the first prototype cars were a strange duck egg blue, and I suspect that they were ex-naval paint because they literally couldn't buy any paint to put on the cars. And then I have a letter from my father which says that, good news, this car will be delivered in May because they'd got some paint and it was black.
I was talking to some of our experts, and beautiful Bristol 400 like this, aficionados would want the original paintwork restored, but between £40,000 and £60,000 for these cars now.
And rising, and it may be a little rough around the edges, but it's still the first that was ever sold.
What we have here is one medal and one token. And on the token it says HMS Terror. Now I think you've got to have quite a lot of bravery to get on a ship called H Family way back.
Yes, these were medals I found in this box in a piece of furniture that we inherited from my husband's grandmother. And I didn't really think anything much of them until a couple of years ago when HMS Terror was in the news. They found the ship in Canada, and I just thought, I've got something in the family with the same name. This is interesting. I became really interested.
Well, it has a big history, and it was involved in the American War of 1812. It then was converted 20 years later into a vessel for polar exploration. Right. And because the structure of the boat was so strong, it was built to withstand the pressure of the ice.
Yes.
So off they set, and it's dated, isn't it, 1836?
Yes.
They set off, heading for Hudson Bay, and then got stuck in the ice, just off Southampton Island. And not just stuck, they spent, I think, 10 months incarcerated in the ice.
Yeah.
And eventually spring comes, and the ice cracked open, and they limped back across the Atlantic and just made it to Ireland when they beached the vessel, but no lives were lost. And your relation, he was, I understand, the surgeon or a doctor?
He was the assistant surgeon on the voyage, yes.
And this was on board ship, and there's some stories that they also traded them with the local Inuits for seal meat and things like that, because some have turned up in Canada in the last few years.
Yes.
The vessel itself had an amazing history, and anybody who went on any Arctic voyage got given one of these medals, and about 1,400 were actually struck.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you must be proud to own them.
Yeah, it's a really interesting window on another world, another lifetime, and it was just a complete unknown. They were going and they had no idea. Yeah.
Very exciting. We have to think about value. The two together with the history and the other medals that relate to your relation, I think we're talking about a figure of between £2,000 and £3,000.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Well, looking at this bronze, what I find so amazing is that it's actually quite harrowing to truly contemplate what's going on here. But at the same time, it's full of real pathos. I mean, it's so beautifully executed, probably made just after the First World War. What fascinates me just as much is how you come to own this thing, because it's not really everybody's taste.
I was left it by a great friend, and all I know is that it was given to him. Well, there's an inscription here.
Yeah, shall I read it?
Yes, please.
It says, after the heroic retreat of the Serbian army through Albanian mountains, a warrior rests on the Adriatic shore at Corfu. I know that shore.
Do you?
Yeah, a friend of mine's got a villa where, and the land from the villa runs down to the shore at Corfu and looks across the sea to Albania, which is where this man retreated from the Kosovo offensive in the First World War in 1915. The man is so hated. The Serbians suffered great losses in that war, and all that's left of him, of his uniform, is his trench hat, and that identifies him as Serbian infantry. And whoever did this bronze, I mean, it's in the style of a man called George Min, who was a Belgian, and he represented the inner struggle, inner spiritual struggle of people, and that became very popularized by the Austrians, Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele, and it has got an Egon Schiele feel about it, about the futility of war. It's so well executed, and it's so poignant. I think it's amazing.
Yes, I do too.
And I think it's a little irreverent to value something that's packs such a powerful message as this so beautifully. But that's what we do on the Roadshow. I would value that easily at £3,000, and knowing who the sculptor is, more.
Wow.
What a pretty moonstone and tiny pink tourmaline, gorgeous necklace. How's it come into your family?
It was my great-grandmother's.
And of course the moonstone is a very romantic stone, full of lovely blue colours and the greys there just sparkling away. It's superb, and I hope you're going to wear it.
I intend to, at least once in my life.
Well, value-wise, at auction, I can see this making in the region of £3,000.
Oh my word. Oh my word, that's incredible, isn't it?
So you've told me that you go to charity shops.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
And what do you pay for it?
£3.
£3?
Yeah.
So in the last 6 months, you've had a chance to have a look at that mark.
Yeah.
Tell me what it says.
I've no idea what it says.
It is a very long text. It tells us which workshop produced it from a whole group that we call Satsumaware, and complicated mark for a complicated scene. But actually looking at it in more depth, it all begins to pull together. The most important man here, amongst all of these figures, is this gentleman with the winged, horned helmet, with his very impressive armour, raised on a dais, surrounded by his attendants, and one of whom sits here. He's receiving a bowl, and into that bowl, this young lady is pouring, I think, probably sake. So this is a very elaborate reception ceremony. I love the horse.
Yeah.
Isn't the horse glorious?
Yep.
And
very good.
is that the groom, do you suppose?
It could be, yes.
If it is, then he's left his trousers behind, hasn't he? And the architectural details are stupendous. You've got lovely Japanese of this partially glimpsed roof here. You've got these lovely elephant support there and the musical gong. Anyway, it is hugely complicated.
Yeah.
And that must have taken a Satsuma painter a good 3 weeks to paint, easily. That's all the sort of good news. The bad news is...
the chips.
The chips. And you knew about the chips.
Yes.
Okay, well, you're here for evaluation.
Yep.
I'm going to value the chips.
Okay. Yep.
We'll start with them.
Yeah, they was from a plate hanger, what was on the plate when I brought it.
So the plate hanger has cost you £500 per chip.
Yep.
So together they've reduced the value of the whole thing by £1,000.
Yeah.
So how much money do you suppose is left in it?
Probably still some money left.
You think
it.
so?
Yeah.
Between £800 and £1,200 maybe?
That's very good. Yeah.
Would that do you?
Yeah. Lovely.
Now, this little cabinet, this medicine chest, I'm sure there's a great story behind it. So, who did it originally belong to?
Belonged to our great-grandfather. John Walter Cox was his name. He died in 1925. He was a chemist in Torquay. Where he got this, we don't know.
So where do you keep this?
We keep it tucked just in a corner somewhere so it doesn't get the sun.
To me, this has been a piece which has been used because
did,
you get other medicine chest or apothecary cabinets, and they've literally they're still bound up where the poisons and things have never been used.
Yeah.
But this has been used,
yes.
And because it's been used, in some cases the bottles have been replaced because they got damaged. But people will accept that now because it's part of its charm, it's part of its history that it has been used. I love the idea of this little measuring device here, and all the calligraphy is beautiful, all hand engraved. Then you've got the pestle and mortar. This is Georgian. This is made around 1800.
Right.
So it's a nice early early piece, and to find mortar and pestle is good. Then when we start to close this up, we've got the original silk velvet. The veneer in mahogany is quietly amazing. Then it would lock, and then we would take it away after the doctor or the physician has used it. So I say it's late 18th century, say about 1790, 1800,
Yes.
when King George III was on the throne. What is it worth?
No idea.
I would say this in today's market is worth in the region between £1,000 to £1,200.
Good heavens. Right, well, very nice too, thank you. Yeah.
We've got some really interesting pop memorabilia here, and it's something that's quite close to my heart because as a youngster, when I first left college, one of the first jobs I ever got was working for a record company. I noticed that this double gold disc here, which is to Radiohead for OK Computer, that seminal album from 1997, has got the name Carol Baxter on it.
Yes.
Can you tell me who Carol Baxter is?
Who Carol Baxter is? Carol Baxter, well, was my sister.
Was your sister?
Yes, unfortunately, she passed away at the tail end of last year.
Right, I'm sorry.
Which was was horrible. And she died without a will.
Right.
Everything went to my mother.
Right.
And when I say everything, this is part of everything.
You arrived with I don't know how many boxing pieces out. What was her position in the record company?
She risen up to, I think, the level of VP.
Right.
And within that
VP,
career...
you better explain
that. Vice President, Parlophone Records.
Right, OK.
But also part of her career was focused with Radiohead. She was their international marketing manager.
Hence the personal presentation of discs like this. I can see we've got some other Radiohead material at the front there.
Yes.
And we've got photographs, and...
There's Carol.
There she is in the photograph.
And this is Radiohead, and this is in America.
Right, OK.
Again, these are my sister and the band, and this is, I believe, this is on an island in Japan.
Right, OK.
Or around Japan.
I also noticed that you had some great kind of original artwork as well.
Yes.
This is for an Iron Maiden album. Some great stuff, and actually it's really, really collectible material.
Yeah.
In a way, the kind of the very personal nature of the collection is against it.
Yes.
I am going to talk a few prices on some of this material. And over my left shoulder here, we've got this really fabulous signed Kate Bush poster. We're probably looking at £200 or £300 like this.
That's good.
The Iron Maiden artwork there, probably in the region of maybe £300-400.
That's good.
The Radiohead was probably a good £200 or £300 just sitting there.
Really?
This double gold disc, I'm going to put £800 to £1,200 on that.
Wow.
So,
I didn't expect that.
So just looking around at what we have here, which is an absolute fraction of what you have got.
You're now worrying me.
There's £1,600-1,800 with just here.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you.
Typical, one of our specialists lazing around when you think no one's looking. Come on, Chris. We've got work to do. You're going to tell me about these chairs.
I am.
And the idea here is to place them in order of value from the lowest to the highest.
Indeed.
OK, so talk me through them.
OK, well, starting from this end, we have a chair designed in 1951. Now, had you visited the South Bank in that year, you would have been at the Festival of Britain. Amazing, amazing event in this country's history. And you might have gone to the cafes there, and you'd have sat outside on one of these chairs.
And this is one of the originals?
This is one of the original chairs, and one of the original festival colours, this bright yellow. It's called the Antelope chair.
So tell me about this one.
It was designed in 1955. And it was, again, instantly popular, hugely popular. It just works. It's elegant. Look at that classic hourglass shape. It's really shouts of the 50s. And it did the job perfectly. It's lightweight, stackable. You can move them around.
And were many of these made?
A lot were made.
Yeah.
A lot were made.
More than of that one?
Yes.
Okay, now what about this? This makes me think of a sort of chair you'd sit in at school.
It does look a bit like a school chair, or maybe something you find in an office or a factory, doesn't it? But what it is, it's a great example of a designer. Modernist designers love to try out new technologies, embrace the future for this new world that they were building. And we see that here. Aluminium for the legs, the cantilevering, and plywood for the chair. Plywood is the wonder material of the 1930s. It's used everywhere.
And this was made then in the 1930s?
It was made in 1933.
And it's so light, isn't it? Anyone got any ideas about this? There's lots of shaking of heads here. What do we think about the Festival of Britain chair? I'm rather drawn to that one. How many think this might be the most valuable? Yeah, hands up? Okay, some. What about this one? 2 more for this one? Oh, look, lots of you aren't putting your hands up at all. Oh my gosh, Chris. I mean, I find this almost impossible. I'm inclined. I mean...
Shall I give you a clue?
Yes, please do.
I'll give you a clue. The best chair is truly international. It was designed by a Hungarian architect who studied and taught at the Bauhaus, and it was made in Switzerland.
So the best chair was Bauhaus. Well, that's got to be this then. So I'm going to say, although this is iconic, it's got quite a lot of damage. There were lots of them made. So this is the least valuable. Shout if you think I'm going madly off course. This is the next most valuable, and this is the most valuable. So 3, 2, 1.
I'll get my coat. Well done.
Oh, thank you. Well, so tell me about this and why it's so important.
It's designed by an architect, which is the course of furniture design in the 20th century. He perfects this idea of the cantilevered chair, which to us we take for granted, but at the time, the 1920s, shortly before this was designed, was completely revolutionary. It had a massive impact.
So how much is this worth today?
You would not be able to pick one of those up for anything less than £5,000.
Wow. Okay. So then we said this was the next one,
yes.
The Festival of Britain chair.
Absolutely.
And so how much would this be worth now?
About £300.
And so then this lovely chair?
Less than £100.
Wow. Well, come on, let's take a seat. I'm going to sit on this one. Chris, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I'm going to come right up front and say I like these. I think they're quite good-looking candlesticks, but that's slightly irrelevant. Do you like them?
I do, yeah. They're quite elegant, I thought.
You thought so? And
yeah.
Did you buy them for their elegance?
Well, actually, I used to be a carer a long time ago for an old lady she was quite a wealthy lady, and she passed away and she left me a few bits of silver and some jewellery. I didn't know what it was that I was going to be receiving. I was presented with a bag, and inside was this beautiful bits of silver. So I sort of looked at them and I didn't think them. I just never thought no more of it. Now I just put them away in the loft.
And they've been there ever since?
Got them out last night.
Wow. These were made in 1907, which was right in the middle of the big period for arts and crafts. The arts and crafts movement was all about taking it back to basics, and think of a silversmith in their studio tapping away, fettling things to their own design or what have you. These have been made to look as if all these rivets have been hand-made and are used to hold together the sheets of metal. So they have a sort of industrial look, but they are trying to cross the bridge between arts and crafts and manufactured. However, these are manufactured. They're made by a big Sheffield silversmith called James Dixon and Son, who made scads and scads of silver, huge, huge output. I mean, does that change your view of them any at this stage? No? You still like them?
I still
like them.
Yeah.
Okay, good. This is probably, if not my favourite design, then up there in the top 2.
And why is that?
Because they're gorgeous. Aren't they gorgeous? Who doesn't like these candlesticks? They're really cool. They would appeal to anybody. They are sort of timeless. They're not too fussy, yet they've got a little bit of detail in them. Class, thank you. That's exactly what they are. I think they're super classy. and be lucky to walk out of a sale room with them for less than about £2,500 for those.
Never. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Oh, blimey. I didn't expect that.
Because they're so cool looking.
I
And
might
in the
use
end,
them now, then.
looking really cool is the best thing an antique can be, really.
I might use them now then.
Really? I won't discourage you.
You just made my day, actually, because I've just resigned from my work after 30 years. I really thought it was just a little bit of tat. I never expected that at all. Really didn't. Gobsmacked.
These jewels are utterly spectacular. The movement, the flow, doesn't matter what they're made of. I just love them. They say fun. How do you feel about them?
I felt fairly indifferent until earlier, and I just thought it maybe was a bit of costume jewellery that my wife gave me to bring along.
Yeah. Who did they belong to then before your wife owned them?
They belonged to my wife's stepmother, and she fled from Nazi Germany with her parents in the 1930s and grew up there, and then she had a very interesting life travelling the world. So with things like...
Yeah. Well, the jewels themselves are dating from the mid-50s onwards period, no later than 1960. They have what is often referred to in the 1950s as this new look, which was actually referring to the clothes that Christian Dior had brought in the late 40s. And it was a freedom of expression after the Second World War. We went back to this idea of bringing out the beauty in clothes, the beauty in women, and this idea of bringing fluidity into clothes, and this also transferred into the jewellery as well. Now, during this period after the war, there was this opportunity to obviously buy new jewellery, but there was still a little bit of resistance to how much new jewellery you bought in order that you weren't seen to be being too extravagant. So one of the things that people did was to break up pieces of jewellery and redesign them in a new way, and this is exactly what we've got here. Now, not to shatter the dreams, but you thought that they were costume jewellery, didn't you? You stepped out
really
this morning.
did, yes.
Yeah, they're not. We have got them full of beautiful diamonds, absolutely stunning, set in white gold. But the reason why I feel that they might have been redesigned from some other jewellery is that we've got a variety of different cuts of stones going on.
Yes.
Set with older Victorian cut diamonds. So those are the ones that probably would have been extracted perhaps from an older piece of jewellery. And then on the sides we've got some really lovely step cut diamonds at the bottom here. Now the older brilliant cut diamonds with the more modern brilliant cut diamonds and these more step cut diamonds, contrasting the Victorian look with a look that we'd seen developing in the 1920s and 30s. And that's what this brooch is all about. It's about bringing those older stones into a very contemporary piece of jewellery. So really great fun, together with the earrings as well. So this lady, this stepmother, vivacious character?
She certainly was, yes, you knew when she was there.
Yeah. Obviously, as a roadshow, we're going to put some values on them. At auction, I'd expect this to fetch in the region of £6,000 to £7,000.
It's very nice, much more than I expected, which was probably nothing.
So you reckon there's over 4,000 Bristol City football programmes?
Yeah.
And how long have you been collecting for?
1984.
And why have you selected Stanley Matthews as your favourite?
Stanley Matthews was one of the all-time footballers.
Yeah. I mean, he arguably the country's greatest footballer, you could say. Did he ever play at Bristol? You're in a Bristol shirt.
Yes.
He did?
Yes.
But he wasn't signed to Bristol?
No. That was during the Second World War.
A presentation match?
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Everyone knows Stanley Matthews. When we were at school and you forgot your shorts, you would have to wear the ones out of the locker room. They were called the Stanley Matthews shorts because of the length of them. So I love it. The condition is everything with these, and the condition on some is great, on others, especially this one that you love, is not so great. All the buyers now are looking for top condition. Rather having 4,000 in average, they'd rather have 200 or 300 top notch.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky thing to value, because if you thought, you know, some of these are 50p each, some maybe £3. With 4,000 of them, what's that? 2,000 plus. So I would say probably 2 to 4,000 as an estimate. And that's without even going through them all. And so would you ever sell them?
Yeah. For a lot of money.
Well, this is my 14th year on the Antiques Roadshow. And when I first joined, I had a checklist of 3 things that I hoped to see during my time.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled to say that today we have very successfully ticked one of those boxes, because before us we've got the most brilliant bit of Muranese art.
Yeah.
Fantastic glass at its best. But how do you come to own it?
Well, it isn't mine, it's my sister's, and she got given it as a wedding present in 1966.
These for me are just such a wondrous thing, in the fact that they are the pinnacle of craftsmanship from the island of Murano, just off Venice.
Right, yeah.
This is just a time when the island was really, flourishing, really finding its feet and creating some of the most spectacular glass in the world.
Yeah.
And Vistosi was no different to the other factories. Alessandro Pianon was brought on board actually in 1956, and initially it was to take the company in a new direction, and first thing he did was actually redesign the brochure, redesign the logo for the firm. And actually by 1960 he'd changed altogether and he'd started developing the glass itself.
Right.
Now that needs architect. But I sort of think when you look at this, is he approaching this with an architect's mind, the way the form is made?
Yeah.
There's a round one in bright orange, there's a tall one in green, there's one that I always call the fortune cookie, which is sort of blue with stripes. There's a big fat sort of mother hen in purple.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's one that's the rarest of them all.
Right.
That one.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of that is down to the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
And when you look, when you really consider, when you look at the grand masters of the Venetian glassworks, of these wonderful creations, this is a very complicated piece of glass to make. It has marine cane all around the front here, marine eyes, but it's square, and he's got this wonderful little pulled beak that just makes him that little character.
Yeah.
And actually, when you sit them together with all of his friends, they just make you smile.
Yeah.
They were expensive when they were new, and they're expensive today. And this is the best one.
Oh, wow.
And I know how much these are worth because this was the last one that I bought. And this one has just cost me the best part of £7,000.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
For ticking one off my list.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Colin, this must be like a trip down memory lane for you.
It certainly is. It's my old friend. Flew this many, many times.
And were you one of the longest serving Concorde captains?
I did 18 years. I started as a captain when I was 36 on Concorde and retired in 1995 on my 55th birthday, as that's how it had to be in those days, rather sadly.
And you've brought loads of memorabilia here. We just picked a few bits out. You've got Tom Stafford, which obviously was the very famous Apollo 10. And am I right in thinking he was the first person to shake hands with a Russian astronaut in
That's
space?
right. They met in space and joined up, and they had a rather tentative handshake between America and the USSR, which was sort of heralding the end of the Cold War.
Yeah, a real breakthrough moment,
A
really.
real breakthrough moment.
And
He was a lovely man.
I think probably the best thing you have here is the photograph of Muhammad Ali. Such a candid shot, isn't it, rather than being a press photograph?
I was travelling as passenger on the aeroplane. We had a period where we used to have one crew down the back, or one captain down the back, and the other one operating, so that we all got some practice. Down the carrying tricks, and I said, well, hang on, I said, look, I'm the one doing the things down here, you know. But he continued with his conjuring tricks, so I got out my camera, took the picture. Sometime later, he was on another flight of mine when I was operating, so I dived into my briefcase and came out with this photograph, and that's what he wrote on it.
So you've been carrying it around all the time between. You knew he'd be on again, yes. And I noticed there was something on your wrist earlier. Do you want to show it to me?
That is a Breitling watch which was made specifically for the Concorde cruise.
Well, it's a very difficult thing to quantify. You know, I think collectively, and you've got lots more. I don't know. How can we add that up? You know, you've got maybe 20 or 30,000 pounds worth, I think.
I've made a terrible mistake. I've given them to my son.
Oh, have you? And the watch, which obviously is the piece de resistance, what would we be looking at that? I would have thought a minimum 15 to 20,000.
Really? Well, my wife won't let me wear it when I go on holiday. I say, but it's my watch.
Maybe not wear it on holiday, but, you know.
Lisa, thank you very much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. No, it's a pleasure.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
While many of today's visitors are enjoying their first look at Concorde, I'm keen to explore more of Bristol's aviation history. Housed here in Colonial Aircraft Company was established in 1910, and aircraft have been made here in Bristol ever since. The first plane built here was the box kite. This rare old film from 1910 shows the crowds who came to get their first ever glimpse of an aircraft. They even made a special postcard to commemorate the occasion. Bristol aircraft production was really boosted by the First World War. In 1917, they were producing biplanes like this. This is the Bristol Fighter, and it can travel at 125 miles per hour. The design is superb. Just look at the tapering fuselage. And it's designed like that so that the gunner could increase his field of fire and fire out the back in dogfights. And this is a model made by apprentices in training to build modern airliners just over the road. Back in the Concorde hangar, the experts still very much in the firing line.
I've been looking at this sheet of stamps here, and something doesn't quite look right.
I believe I am the only person in the world who has her head on a stamp that's been through the British Postal Service, apart from the Queen. My dad, back in the 80s, had a jeweller's on the Chipping Salisbury High Street. It was a slump in trade. The people on the High Street were desperately trying to think, what on earth are making stamps? A local artist did the pictures. Dad made the stamps, but then they needed the Queen's head, which they didn't have, and that's highly illegal. With me being Elizabeth, I was the obvious choice. He put them through on the 1st of April, knowing full well, tongue-in-cheek, that possibly he'd get away with it. Scotland Yard did come down. They seized all his printing presses. It got in all the papers. It did exactly what it needed to do, and trade increased.
Brilliant. I think there must be some value to them. Maybe the kind of philatelist who's fanatical about forgeries and fakes maybe would go for them.
Okay.
And maybe they might pay £100.
Hey, £100, that's great.
Well, it's no secret that actually I've had an enormously long career in the jewellery world, and I've seen tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pieces of jewellery, but I have never, ever seen a jewel in the form of a light bulb before. And so this is a whole new experience for me, and I want you to tell me about why.
Well, it was given to me by my great aunt. She started off as scullery maid, ended up marrying the gentleman farmer who was related to a very wealthy family. And it was one of his aunts that was given it as the Lady Mayoress of Tynemouth when she...
So perhaps she had some reservation about wearing a light bulb. Well, to wear a light bulb is unconventional, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although rubies and diamonds, beautifully made, even got the little insulated flecks. I've never ever seen anything like that, and I think happily we ponder forever what its significance was, but we needn't, because it's all on the top of the box, isn't it? And what does it say?
Says it was presented to the Lady Mayoress of Tynemouth, Mrs. Jacob Daglish, on the occasion of her switching on the electric at Tynemouth on the 3rd of April 1901.
1901.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say the whole country was in complete darkness in 1901 for one very good reason, is that the Queen and Empress of India had died.
Oh.
And that is the very year. It's almost an irrelevance, really, except to say that that was a milestone in the history of the United Kingdom, because in a sense she represented the old world, and what followed with Edward VII was a new world fascinated by electricity, and what they wanted to do was get rid of all the terrible gas mantles and the stinking oil lamps and this, that and the other, and go for this bright new lovely colourless, scentless light with no maintenance much except for the generators. And this is undoubtedly why it's such...
Well, it was given to me as a little girl, or it was going to be left to me, basically, when I was small, I just liked little things, you know, and it was so cute and different.
But amazingly, jewellery of this calibre, historic jewellery, carries quite a premium because it's got everything going for it. And I think that jewellery collectors would really want that. I certainly would. And I think they might be persuaded to delve into their pocketbooks to the tune of, well, £1,500 to £2,000.
Oh, wow.
But they're not getting it, are they?
No, they're not. No.
Maybe I should raise the bid. I love it.
It is
I think
very
it's
cute.
utterly bonkers.
Yeah.
Before our next item, I wanted to let you know about a special programme we're making to mark the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain and the start of the Blitz. After the German occupation of France in the summer of 1940, the fear of invasion loomed and Britain prepared for the worst. While the RAF fought to protect the skies, on the ground, the nation was about to endure the onslaught of the Blitz. If you have an item which tells a story about these events, please get in touch with us at antiques.roadshow@bbc.co.uk.
What a wonderful piece of tool, and where it's from.
It's an Irish shillelagh. My mother was given it about 70 odd years ago. Where it came from originally, I have no idea.
This is as far away from Ireland as you can get in the Pacific. It's from Fiji.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm positive.
Right, fair enough.
It's a war club, and it's for caving people's heads in. This type of war club is called a vunikau. It's an amazing example. Do you know how old this is?
No idea at all.
200 years, early 19th century, 1800, maybe late 18th century even. And it's a beautiful, beautiful colour. Just what collectors want. It's a kind of ironwood. It's very heavy wood. And I can tell the age of it by the patina on the ends here. They are just so dark, it couldn't be less than 200 years old. And it's a marvellous example. It's massive in weight, it's massive in size. And obviously, if anybody was thinking of attacking somebody carrying one of these, they'd think more than twice. Because it was a dangerous place to be in Fiji then. You know, it was just, that was what the world was like. And you see this beautiful chip carving down here. Gory, but if you were fighting in a battle with this and blood was running down the shaft of this, when it got to the grip, your hands would slip. So this lovely geometric chip carving would make the grip more firm for you. People really love these things. Something like this has a value. In a sale, it would be estimated at between £4,000 to £5,500.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thanks very much indeed.
You've brought some quite unusual items along with you. How do you end up having so many old clothes?
My twin girls wanted to go into amateur dramatics and the costumes were absolutely rubbish. So I was brought in to be their costume lady. I was just interested in the dates because I can't date them.
Well, you've certainly got masses from the Victorian period, a great long reign going from 1837 to 1901.
Really?
And this bright green taffeta dress here, a completely different date. It dates from the 1950s.
Right.
I think really if you want £300 or £400.
That's good.
Thanks so much for bringing in so many suitcases of clothing. I think the hat would look great on you.
Oh, right. OK.
Well, we've had big objects and we've had small objects, and this is certainly the smallest vase I've seen today.
It's quite small.
Yeah. Now,
Yes.
tell me about it.
Well, I've had it at home for some time now, and I'm pretty sure it came from my grandparents.
Yeah.
I don't know what the connection is or anything. Possibly my grandmother picked it up at a church sale, perhaps.
OK. This is a snuff bottle.
OK.
And the Chinese were very, very keen on snuff from the late 1600s. Now, we get a lot of snuff bottles. This one's a little bit special. Well, first of all, let's just look at it roundabout. You've got a little scene, a garden scene of a pine tree with a little Pekingese dog.
Yes.
you've got a prunus in blossom with a little Pekingese dog, and then another Pekingese dog. 3 friends, perhaps. Each one of them has a little inscription in Chinese above it. I think this is the or some such,
or something,
or some such Pekingese. But let's turn it upside down and have a look at that. And first of all, we have the name of the current emperor when this was made.
Oh, does it?
Guangxu.
Right.
And then we have a year date, which takes us to the Shi Mao year, which I have to say I had to consult. It comes out in 1891. Oh. So it's a dated bottle. And we also have the painter's name. And what a lovely thing that is. It is a highly personalised snuff bottle. You know, to get the snuff out of there, if there is any there, you have to use a snuff bottle spoon.
Yes.
And this is a typical snuff bottle. Well, not so typical. It's got wiggly shut and it goes in beautifully. Look at that. It's designed. And if we were to scrape it out, there's a little bit of snuff. There's a lot of snuff in there. I'm not going to empty the whole thing, but that is a snuff bottle and it's still got the original late 19th century snuff in it. Rare object. Value, well, a typical porcelain snuff bottle is worth, of this period, is worth somewhere around, yeah. This one's a little special, so we're going to put £1,000 to £1,500 on.
No.
Shall we try a little?
So what I love about the Antiques Roadshow is that just occasionally we get an innocuous-looking oak box like this that turns up, and it usually turns out to be something incredibly boring. But this time, when we open the box, we have something very special, don't we? And we should just say right now that this is an orrery, or more technically, this is a tellurium, and underneath is a planetarium. And together we generally call them an orrery. And one thing that I'd like to do before we have a chat is put the key on and give it a whirl. And what we have is the moon running around the Earth. How on earth did you come into possession of this?
Well, it belonged to our father, and he bought it, I think, probably sometime immediately after the war.
And let's just also have a look at what's in here, because it comes in 2 parts. This is the planetarium, and if we spread all of the planets out, but when they're sitting on that, and that connects to there, and the whole lot can spin around. The 4th Earl of Orrery. Yeah. You probably knew that.
No.
Well, in the very early 18th century, the Earl of Orrery in Cork wanted a planetarium made for him. The first English person to make a planetarium, or an orrery as it then became known, was George Graham, who's a very famous clockmaker who died in 1751. But one of his earliest commissions was to make an orrery. This is a later version. When you grew up, did you look at it? Were you allowed to look at it?
It sat quietly in the corner, and we get it out and
play with it.
And you twirl the knob, and it was
a miracle it survived, actually. It's a miracle it survived.
That is astonishing. This one's made by Jones, who was one of the most famous makers of scientific instrument and orreries at the very end of the 18th century and the early 19th century. They didn't make a lot of them. They occasionally appear at auction. What's special about this? All of this is complete and it's working, and the papers aren't too stained, they're in good condition. Do you have an idea of value at the moment? Not at the moment.
Not really.
No. £50,000.
Well,
that is very special.
That does make it special. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you remember we were looking at vintage chairs with Chris Yeo earlier on in the programme? Modern as you can get, made by Thomas Heatherwick, who designed the Olympic torch in the 2012 stadium. And this is how it works. Wah! Wah! So, antique of the future? I'll let you decide. From the Antiques Roadshow team, bye-bye. Wah! Oh my God, I'm stuck.